All right, so today we're going to use plaster gauze strips, and we're going to start to cover our wire armature with a layer of plaster. Before we have plaster strips, we have to cut some to use. And the thing about plaster is it is dusty, it is messy, and it gets everywhere. Any tool that comes into contact with it is going to forever be a plaster tool, okay? So we have separate scissors that we use to cut the plaster, and you have to always cut it over your tub. So I'm cutting my strips over my tub. I prefer my strips to be about 2 or 3 inches wide because I can always fold them in half to make them smaller, but I can't fold them and make them bigger. You know what I mean? So let's try and show you about like that. Okay, so you're going to cut about, let's say 20 to 40 strips to start off with. After you've cut 20 to 40 strips, then you're ready to move on. So here we go. Now, one of the things I want you to notice about the plaster is it's got all these holes on the gauze, okay? Plaster goes through a chemical change when it gets wet, and then it will harden, and then it will never be the same as it was again. Kind of like clay could get hard and we can soften it back up again if we need to. Plaster does not work that way. The chemical change happens very quickly. Once you dip it in water, you've got about 5 minutes to work with it. And if it gets wet and you don't use it, it will get ruined. So this is a piece that's been ruined. I can dip it in water and it's not going to change. It's always going to just stay this shape. It's not going to let me smooth it. This is trash, so I'm going to throw it away. How did that happen? How did that get in here? When people dunk their strips in the water, sometimes they don't realize it and they trail the plaster strip over the tub and water drips down into the tub. And then that's going to ruin everything it touches. Okay? So when you set yourself up to work, you want to have your strips a little farther away from you, then your water a little closer to you, so that the way you do it is you're taking your plaster, you're dunking it here, and then you're working over here so that you don't accidentally drip water over the tub. So kind of keep that in mind. Back to this texture, you want to get it wet and then rub it so that that texture goes away. It becomes smooth, and that's activating the plaster. And then I'm just going to kind of drape it on here, and I'm going to smooth it as best I can. This strip isn't long enough to go all the way around my pear, so it's open there. That's okay. I'm going to take another strip. I'm going to dip it. I'm going to rub it over the water. So let me move this so you can see. I'm rubbing it over the water to kind of get that texture to change. And then I'm just draping it over my armature, draping it over my wire sculpture. And I'm going to keep doing that until I've got one layer done. So I want to get one layer all over the whole thing. And the thing about this, what seems familiar to me, is that the more I add, like the farther along I get, the more stability or more strength it seems to have. And I felt that way when I was using wire also. Like the more wire I added, the stronger it got. So it's kind of funny, we're using 2 totally different materials, but they're giving me the same sort of feeling a little bit. Now this one I didn't get rid of that texture. I forgot, so I need to kind of get in there and rub it with my fingers, because getting rid of that texture is a sign that you've activated the plaster. I've got kind of a little hole here. I can take a piece, and I'm kind of activating it with one hand, and I can just drape it over that. And I'm going to keep going, smoothing as I go, until my whole piece is covered. Now, you don't want to keep messing with it. Once you've got your first layer on, it needs to be left alone to dry. Now, you can see my pear sculpture has got a lot of corners and edges, and I want it to be smooth. But this was the best I could do for the first coat. Tomorrow, we're going to put on another coat and try to smooth out some of these planes and panels and corners to make it look a bit more organic, okay? So Once you get this part done, once you get a full layer on, you're just going to set it to the side and spend the rest of your time cutting more strips, okay? So first thing you do is cut about 20 to 40 strips. Then you can start working on your plaster. Then you're going to set it aside to dry. Once it's got one layer, that's all for the day. And then we'll cut more strips, okay? So let's get you your materials and let's get started.